Our scripture verse this morning is Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. And in reality, this topic goes all the way through to verse 15. But if we combine his direction regarding alms and gifts with prayer, we won't have time to eat lunch. Which should never, ever, ever be a reason for not talking about it. But, that's the one that comes to mind first. The other reason is that at some point you just get tired of my drone and you're going to go to sleep. So why would we keep you here while you get to go to sleep? There are more comfortable places to sleep. Chapter 6. Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. When therefore you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you that they have their reward in full. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your alms may be in secret, and that your Father who sees in secret will repay you. So the first question that I asked myself when I was reading this is, how does one begin to talk about individuals and their excesses? Yes, I said excesses. Their excesses with giving alms before we have even discussed tithes. However, many of you have already heard the sermons on tithing. More than once. Probably more than you want to. And you already know that the tithe belongs to Yehovah, to the Lord who rules, to the Lord who judges. So we are already aware of the marked difference between tithing and alms. A short summary, just because, okay? A short summary, just because. The tithe is a tenth off the top that actually belongs to him. It does not even belong to us. It does not even belong to us when we start off with it. It belongs to him. So alms are those gifts that we choose to share with those who are less fortunate. They are those that we use for missions. They are those that we use for special projects. They are those that we use for building. Some of us like to take our tithe and say, okay, this part of the tithe goes to the building project, and then what building project? We still have a building project. Did you know that? Still on the books. We're some year going to have a building. But anyway, yeah. We can divide it, or we can take it and give it to the missions, because missions is actually part of preaching, right? Or we can do some special project with it. The problem is that you and I, or especially I don't know what God says to you necessarily, but I don't feel like I'm wise enough to make that decision with what belongs to him in the first place. So, there, I've said that enough to get me into a little bit of trouble this morning. Have you ever known anyone whose name was on a building? or whose name is on the wing of a hospital, or whose name is on a chair in a college. You know, that's the one that I always thought was funny, because I rarely had a professor in college who sat in a chair. Now, he did it in his office, but when he was standing in front of the classroom, he rarely stood in a chair because he was too busy. You know, we had chalkboards. We didn't have computerized things. We had chalkboards. And he was too busy writing on the chalkboard the stuff that he wanted you to remember. So what the heck is a chair? But you all know what I'm talking about. Or how about the ones that, this has always been my favorite one, and I've overworked it, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But what about buying the pew in the church and putting your name on it? Third from the front, right hand side. Okay. Have you ever known those kinds of people? There seems to be an inherent need for us to be remembered unto infinity. But as I look at the news these days, sometimes recent events are beginning to cast shadows on the memorials that we have to people, to individuals, because the social values change, and what was once lauded is now brought into question. What you did when you were 15 years old matters. More to the point, what you did when you became an adult, whether you were mature enough or not, there does come a point when you become an adult and you're supposed to start taking responsibility. Those things matter. And so when you're 50 or 60 and you decide to give this money for the wing of a hospital, somebody's going to look back to when you were in college and whatever that thing was that you did that you don't want, excuse my bad English, that you don't want nobody to know. Sometimes the question marks are justified as we look at the morality of private lives in relation to scriptural truth. And that's one of the reasons why it is important that we teach scriptural truth to our children and to our grandchildren and to our great-grandchildren ad infinitum. Because I think this is kind of universal. I have never really been able to see here's the underline, all of the long-term benefits or consequences of my actions. You know, sometimes we do things on the spur of the moment and we don't even think about it. What is the long-term effect of that going to be? But along with great presence in the public eye comes an even greater sense of responsibility to uphold the truth of Yehovah's purpose, of what he wants us to do, of what he wants us to teach other people. And so the things that you do when you're 25, 26, 27, when you're already in the ministry, over what happens when you're 40 or 50 or 60, it makes a difference, because people look back and they say, I remember. It's so easy. It's so easy to allow a little bit of fame to color our perspective so that we begin to lose our humility and over our ego. our humility, to guard our hearts against the jealousy that can raise its ugly head in the midst of something as simple as giving aid to a brokenhearted. You know, you're just giving aid, but you don't know what that does. Power. Power comes with fame. Power comes with negative fame. We don't think about that. Power comes with positive fame and negative fame. All you have to do, and this is a political statement that is not a political statement. All you have to do is look at your politicians. You got the good ones, you got the bad ones. You got the mediocre ones. Power comes with all of them because they're all of them famous. I wish I didn't watch TV at all sometimes. There are those who seek out fame for the power and the prestige, regardless that being their God, Scripture tells us that when you have fame and when you rely on your fame, you already have your reward. Does that mean that everybody that is famous already has their reward? I'm kind of looking at those who build on purpose their position in the world to make themselves better than others, whether they are or not. The Greek word for reward here implies wages. It implies being hired. See, we look at being hired as having a boss above us, but sometimes it's being hired by those who we are supposed to be serving. But we take it and we move it to the other level. And thus, they already have their payment. This kind of recognition begs the question as to whether they are now blocked from ever entering to an eternity with Him. Think about that. Over here he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them, otherwise you have no, I can't get past that word. Is that what it say? No? You have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. I think it's important to be wary of being famous. Because kind of this goes to the prophecy against those shepherds who use their position in the church to abuse the sheep. Those who think that they know better than Yehovah as to what is good for the sheep, and so they do it themselves, when your focus is only on how it will benefit your earthly condition. And why should there be any further expectation than how it furthers my condition? Parable of the sheep and the goats. I did this for you. Father, I did this for you. How come that doesn't count? If you're doing it for the kingdom, be quiet. That's not what I wrote here. I wrote the other two words, the four-letter word, the two-letter word, okay? But I'm using the nicer one. Be quiet. Nobody needs to know. Not sure if I've brought up Doc Johnson before or not, but I had this dentist. When I was when I was in Valparaiso. I had this dentist, and anytime something happened in the church, Doc Johnson knew about it, and somehow the money showed up. And Doc Johnson was not the only wealthy man in that church. He was one of several, but after my mother retired from the Chicago Tribune and became the church treasurer, he would come to the house. He wouldn't come to the church. He would come to the house. And you know how you got a house with 8 kids in it? Do you think you can keep anything quiet? You can try. You try really hard. My mom and dad would be in the back of the house with all the doors shut and tell you can't leave the family room, which is down on the main level of the house. Somebody always snuck upstairs. Somebody would always come down and say, hey, you know what Doc Johnson said this time? When my dad was first, this is one that my mother was still working for the Chicago Tribune at this point, but when my dad was first promoted to I can think of his administration anyway, when he was promoted out of salary and into the other side, we had a period of about 6 weeks when he didn't get paid. We went from getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. He got a promotion with a big salary, but we didn't have any money because they didn't tell him he was going to get promoted. He got promoted. They didn't pay. He had a 2-week period on the old one plus 4 weeks until the end of the month. 6 weeks with no income, except my mother's, but still, no income, more or less. Somehow, money kept showing up at the door. That was before we knew that Doc Johnson was doing this kind of stuff. We didn't know. How he knew that, I don't know. I do know that the banker in the church would come in and make a big deal about putting the new roof on the church. And the other doctor, we're not going to go through all those people. We're not. Then we have the ongoing discussion as to when enough is enough and when our giving becomes a burden upon us and the church. See, there was a fairly simple manner of dealing with this when we were an agrarian people. Leviticus 19:9 and 23:22 and Deuteronomy 24:20 through 22 all tell us about how we are supposed to leave the corners and the edges of our fields, and anything that you drop while you're taking the goods from the field to the storage area is supposed to stay there, because this is for the benefit of those people who do not have. And sometimes, according to some of the stories, sometimes things would get dropped or things would get left because the owner of the property knew that somebody was coming along and needed it. You read Ruth? Took care of it. The Hebrew people knew that it was expected that they would not harvest the corners or the edges of the field, and the field when it was harvested was open to those who were indigent or those who were traveling, so that they would have something while they were traveling. They were taking care of it. They didn't have the problem of enough is enough and you are getting too great for your own needs. One of the things that really, this is going to get me in trouble with some of my historians in the Seventh-day Baptist denomination, but that's all right. One of the things that really got to me when I joined the Seventh-day Baptist denomination, and in my first summer, I spent the first 9 months of that in Kansas City, and then I went to summer. Words escape me today. I went to summer session where all the pastoral students were supposed to go to Plainfield. I almost said Philadelphia. That's American Baptist. Plainfield. We all had to go to Plainfield for 3 weeks. And we had to do a lot of studying and write a lot of papers. But we also had to go to the Plainfield church, unless you were lucky enough to be friends with Ken Croniger, who would take you to D.C. But still, the first two Sabbaths that I spent there, I went to the Plainfield church. And in the Plainfield church, this is a matter of history, in the Plainfield church, one of the gentlemen, you can look this up, I'm not going to tell you his name, because I really don't remember. It was Babcock Bond. I know it wasn't a Davis. One of them. One of them decided that he wanted to memorialize his 3 wives. So he had them put in a stained glass window above the organ in the sanctuary of the Plainfield church. Enough is enough. Now that's just probably more than here, but it is history. The Hebrew people knew how to deal with that. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were working with. The Proverbs also share, in Proverbs 19:17, they share that those who are gracious to the poor are those who are actually lending to Yehovah. Have you ever thought of yourself as being a lender to the I Am? Now, in the Southern Baptist Church, they would say that was putting jewels in your crown. But jewels in your crown only work if you're not promoting them. Because those who are gracious to the poor lend to Yehovah, who will repay them. Keep your mouth shut. Don't put your wives up above the Lord. So, blowing the trumpet is a two-edged sword. There are those who make a living off of being and appearing to be destitute. See, that's the other side. That's the other side of the alms question. Is that there are those who make their living off of being or appearing to be destitute. If one has the expectation that they are entitled to an extra share because they are without, they're making their purpose out of poverty, and where is their faith? Because it's an expectation, it's not a matter of faith. It's a purpose of life. Have they not also received their reward because they're broadcasting their sense of entitlement to the rest of the world so that the rest of the world pays their bills. I wonder about the poor of third world countries, where they actually live from day to day by their faith in the Holy One who is in heaven, because they have no choice. Do you know often people who are poor are much happier than people who are wealthy? Seriously. People who are poor are much happier than people who, they don't have to worry about where their money's going to be in the bank. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that worries about how much money is in the bank. You can ask. Ask any of my kids. That's just one of those things that I don't know where it came from. I was not a depression child. But there's a difference between those and those who are living in a society where they could be doing whatever they need. God never says that those who do not work do not eat. That's a kind of a One of the founders of Virginia said that. Don't remember which one. But one of the founders. But he does say that if your expectation is greater than your faith, then your expectation is what's driving you, not your faith. Pay attention. Have we witnessed those who garner more than their own portion as they go through the breadline and gleaning and what was dropped in the field? And we're going to stack up a little bit more over here, even though we know we don't need it. Do you remember the manna? And he said, don't take more than you need. Don't take more than you need, it's going to spoil. Except on the Sabbath, when you take 2 days' portions, but don't take 3. Take 2. Every other day you take 1. I'll take care of you. Do what I tell you to do. Okay, so how do I judge what position any one of those I observe is in when they pass through my presence? What is my responsibility towards judging other people because of what they take or don't take, because of what they have or don't have, because of what they need, what I feel they need or don't need? See, that one falls under the category of nunya. I loved it when that word came out, nunya. Nunya business. It's not your responsibility. That you leave upstairs. I have enough things to worry about that I don't need to worry about without worrying about that kind of stuff. Perhaps the key word in here is the word judge. Perhaps it is better to leave that also to the one who knows our intent. What's in your heart, what he wants you to do. Do not be dismayed. The Holy One is not mocked. We may be smug. We may consider that we are receiving what we are owed. But is it truly what we are owed? That comes into that word, hypocrites, the Greek word. It's the same one, that word is the same one that is used for a stage actor. You know what a stage actor is, right? And that's not a trick question. You know what a stage actor is. Stands on stage and he acts. All right. Well, that's the same. Hypocritus is the same word that is used for stage actor who entertains us with his skill in performance. So a hypocrite is someone who entertains us with his performance, regardless of which side of the fence we're standing on. There is, interesting to me, there is no Hebrew word that translates or even transliterates to what we would consider equal with the Greek word Hippocrates. I couldn't even say it this time. Or the English version, hypocrite. You know, when you're a teenager, that word comes out your mouth every 2 minutes. Hypocrite. Some of us learn them when we grow up, maybe, hopefully. So anyway, I'm not going to read the Hebrew words. You won't remember, and you won't remember them anyway, and I'm not giving them to you. One of the ones that is used most common for that kind of behavior, even though it's not there, that kind of behavior that might be included when considering the typology of such a person. The definition, the adjective that is used would be one who is painful, as in very difficult to observe. And isn't that kind of what we use that word for? Someone who is painful, as in very difficult to watch, because you can't tell what their truth is and what their false is. Stage actor. They hide it. And sometimes we can see it, but sometimes we can't. Or sometimes we just get sucked into it because they can do it so well, and they just keep cycling it, and you have no time to think about it or to consider it, and you get sucked right into the middle of it. Drama. The second adjective is equivalent to being insincere. So when you combine being insincere with being difficult to observe, are you really wanting to be with us? And if they're really, really good, I'm not talking about the ones like that are actually making their living as an actor entertaining us. I'm talking about the other ones, the ones who make their living being an actor, not entertaining us, but still entertaining us. The second word, the third word that is used, that is put into this category, that in the New Testament, or I'm sorry, in the English version, would be hypocrite, isn't any more flattering. That adjective given, it means sanctimonious. So here you have someone who is difficult to observe, insincere, and sanctimonious. Now you know why teenagers like that word? Why some of us adults like that word? We got somebody who's sanctimoniously insincere and difficult to observe. So, and I want to throw a fourth one in there. How about mealy mouth? Anybody else ever use that word, mealy mouth? My mother would say that word, and I would crack up. I would just crack up. What? Mealy? I mean, I don't have a definition for me. I know what it means, but I can't tell you. One I haven't heard for a while. So the questions that we need to be looking at as we're talking about it, we're looking at ourselves and thinking if we are in this column where we are telling everybody what we are giving and how much we are giving and what we are doing with it and how we want it spent and putting it on the third pew from the front on the right-hand side. Am I seen as more righteous if I make sure that my entire community knows that I provide for the needy from my wealth, or when what I do is observed, is as observant to the public eye as I can make it? That's what he's talking to. Are you doing this so that everybody in the world knows that you are more righteous than anyone else, and that they observe you putting your wealth into the public eye so that you can be seen as giving it? We observe, we view the word hypocrite as one who is sanctimonious in both word and deed. And sometimes that attitude is more in word than in deed, especially when we dig into other people's pockets to get it. Ooh, that never happens among church people, does it? Because I'm going to determine what you deserve. The problem with that is that sometimes that I is the left hand who knows what is required despite what the right hand is doing. It is one thing to work towards spurring others to move out of their self-centered inclination toward doing things. Do you know what the I am has told someone else to do in the depth of their prayer closet? Now, I want you to draw a little bit of line here without becoming sanctimonious or an insincere, I missed the middle one, insincere, painfully difficult, sanctimonious person. I want you to put this out there. Yehovah has given us guidelines to know whether or not a person is using their Christianity for their own benefit or whether they are actually being members of the family. Those people who will call on God in a crisis but won't go to church, won't talk to anybody, won't be part of anything else, doesn't tithe, doesn't... Okay, now I understand. This is a very difficult position to be in. And we are not allowed to judge, but we are allowed to know. Some people pull our legs just to pull them. And then they'll turn around and say, "You don't know what God told me in private." No, I don't. But he tells me in here, many places, one of them being in Hebrews, he tells me that I have to be in church worshiping him, not worshiping other people, not occupying the pew because that's the pew with my name on it. No, the purpose is that you are actually being his disciple. And still you're not allowed to judge, but you do know. The cool part about tithing in America is that unless you are in certain churches, nobody knows whether you're tithing or not. And it's really not their business. But he knows. And you know. Right? He knows and you know. And if you're acting, if you're being a stage actor, I love these ones on Facebook that say, are you paying attention to your elderly parents? Because someday they're going to die and you're going to wish you had. You can do the same thing with Yehovah. Now, he's not going to die. But I am. You are. And if you only go to him when you need something, isn't that the same thing as only calling your parents when you need something? Get off that subject. But it does. It's the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing, and often we treat our salvation, our holiness, the one who takes care of us, the same way that we treat other people that we know can do things for us. But you're not allowed to judge. But you are allowed to know. Get the difference. You see the difference. You are not allowed to judge. In other words, you can't hold it against them. But you are allowed to know, which means you know in your mind, in your heart. And sometimes that's just painful to watch. Sometimes the insincerity verges on being sanctimonious. So now, the last several weeks I have closed with, he knows the intention of your heart. The question I want you to think about today is, who knows the condition of someone else's heart? Turn in your hymnals to number 563. Count your blessings, number 563.
When you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your
stand for the benediction. Now, Lord, let your servants depart in peace according to your word, for our eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all people, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and your glory and the glory of your people Israel. Amen.